Hi, everybody, and welcome to Observing with Webb for January of 2017, take 2. Apparently, the last time my audio wasn't working, so we'll just find out if it works this time around. So, anyway, welcome to Observing with Webb, where the armchair astronomer figures out what they're looking at, why it's so cool, and what they should check out next. January wouldn't be so exciting if it weren't for the two close encounters with the Moon, Venus, and Mars that you'll be able to see twice, as I just said. And also this month you'll be able to see Jupiter, Saturn, and maybe even Mercury. So let's start off by talking about the planets that we can see. And here I have this set up for January 1st, which is in the past. But either way, I have that for sunset. Let me just move that a little further so it's a little bit darker. And now what you'll see here is we've got Venus and Mars. And Venus and Mars are going to be our sunset planets for the month. And now, technically, Neptune is in there as well, but you can't see that without a telescope. So for those of you who have a telescope, give it a shot. But if you don't, I'd say look at Venus and Mars instead. Now, what you'll notice is Venus and Mars are there. And then let me go through the days of the month. And you'll notice that Mars and Venus right now are about 10 degrees apart. And as the month goes by, they get closer and closer until they're about 5 degrees apart by the end of the month. And that's about as close as they're going to get for this go-around. But that's still pretty close. And in fact, on the 31st, Venus, Mars, and the Moon make a pretty cool triangle. But anyway, that's the evening planets that you can see. And remember, Venus will be the first one that you see. It'll be nice and bright. It's going to be in a half phase or a quarter phase, depending on how you look at it. But if you look through a telescope, you should see a half phase. It should not be a perfect circle. If it is a perfect circle, either you don't have enough magnification or you're out of focus. So give that a shot. Mars will be harder to see because it'll be red. It's dimmer, but you will be able to pick it out compared to the stars around it because it will be brighter. So those make up the evening. Let's talk about the morning, because it's not until the morning that you will actually be able to see anything else. So let me look over here, January 1st, and let me fast forward time on January 1st. Okay, keep going, midnight. Oh, there we go. All right, so about midnight, 1:30 a.m. is when you'll be able to see Jupiter at the beginning of the month. And by the end of the month, it'll be about midnight that Jupiter will rise. And what you'll see is that it'll be low on the horizon. So if you wait a little bit, let it get a little bit higher, you'll be able to see Jupiter out there, which is beautiful to see with a telescope, because you can see the four Galilean moons, Io, Callisto, Europa, and Ganymede. Even with binoculars, if you have a nice steady hand or a mount, or even a basic telescope, you can see the moons, or four of the moons of Jupiter. But that's going to rise up throughout the morning. It's going to get higher and higher until, excuse me, until right about sunrise. Sorry, I'm having some computer issues there. Until right about sunrise, it's going to be pretty high in the sky, about halfway up the sky, and almost directly in the south. So it'll be bright. It'll be brighter than anything around it. In fact, let me double check. Jupiter is negative 1.95, and Spica is, I don't see it in there. Oh, 0.96. So yeah, it's going to be even brighter than Spica, which it's nearby. But either way, there we go. Now, what's going to happen after that is Saturn. Now, Saturn is down here. Let me go to, well, technically sunrise, but let's back it off a half hour to about 7 o'clock when you can still see some things. Now, about 7 o'clock, okay, if we look low on the horizon around 7 o'clock, you might be able to catch Mercury and Saturn. Let me set this up so we can see what happens throughout the month. So we're looking southeast in the morning, 7 o'clock, and as the month goes by, Saturn and Mercury both get higher, but then around the 10th is when Mercury sort of pauses. So if you want to find Mercury, the 10th to the 20th is probably your best bet, but you'll need binoculars because it's getting light out at that point. Saturn, though, should be easier to find because, well, it's brighter. Okay, Mercury is right about 0, and Saturn is at 0.5. Oh, actually, Saturn might be a little bit dimmer, but Saturn and Mercury will be there. But as you go throughout the month, Saturn sort of breaks away and Mercury starts diving back toward the sun. And so Saturn's going to be easier to find because you can get out even earlier at the end of the month. In fact, even as early as like 5:30 in the morning, if you have a nice clear view of the horizon, you can catch Saturn. So anyway, just to summarize, the sunrise planets or morning planets will be definitely Jupiter, probably Saturn, and maybe Mercury if you're really good. Whereas the western sunset planets will be Mars and Venus for the month of January. Excuse me. By the way, if you're looking for Venus and Mars, you got to get out there before 8:30 p.m. All right, let me move on to some of the events. So let's start back at January 1st, which, well, it's past January 1st, but if you were checking out the night sky on January 1st, you might have noticed a very thin crescent moon with Venus and Mars right nearby. Then on the 2nd, the moon was in between Mars and Venus, a nice crescent. I wish I had gotten a picture, but I believe it was cloudy that night. And then the next night on the 3rd, the moon was making a line with Mars and Venus. So that was pretty neat. But then from there, not really much happens. In fact, if you track the moon here, in fact, you know what? Let me center it. You'll see it move across. You would see it move across the sky at the same time. But here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to center on that. Okay. I'm going to zoom in. I want you to notice what happens to the phase of the moon as the month goes by. All right. So on the 3rd, it looks like that. And then on the 4th, the 5th, you see now it's at the first quarter phase. The right half of it is lit up. It's visible until midnight, maybe even as early as 3 o'clock or 2 o'clock, if you know where to look, which would be more the east-southeast. And then every day from there, it gets thicker and thicker and thicker, and it gets bigger and bigger until January 12th, when we have a full moon. And that's when it's going to rise off in the east right about sunset. So the sun sets, the moon rises, it's out the whole night. Also on the 19th, oh, sorry, I skipped ahead. That's the 12th. Let me move ahead a little bit, and let's say it's midnight, or past midnight, 2 a.m., and the moon is going to now start waning, and right on the day, the 19th, where you have the last quarter moon, that's when you're going to see the moon very close to Jupiter. Okay? In fact, let me zoom in a little bit more there. You'll be able to find the moon right here. Nice 3rd quarter moon. Left half is lit up. You can only see it from about midnight until the morning. But then Jupiter is right nearby. In fact, I believe they are 2 degrees apart, which is 2 pinkies widths at arm's length. Okay? So that is what's going on with the moon there. And then, well, remember that we're talking about morning planets here. Let's fast forward time to, let's go to sunrise and back it off just, well, let's go to sunrise. You see that on the 20th, the moon gets closer to Saturn and those morning planets. And then finally, on the 24th, Saturn and the moon are pretty close together, and they're only about 3 degrees apart, which is 3 pinkies widths, if you have 3 pinkies. But they're pretty close together as well. Nice crescent. And in fact, if you get out there in the early morning, you have a nice clear view of the horizon, you should be able to get a good picture of the moon and Saturn. I don't think you'll see the Milky Way back there, but it is technically there. All right, so then, yeah, the new moon, if you've noticed the pattern of the moon. The new moon is on January 28th. Those would be the darkest skies. And then the moon becomes a sunset object, so we got to start looking back to the west. And there it is. Now you won't be able to see it on the 28th. But then we have our second close encounter. So if you missed the first one because I put my video out too late, you can now look southwest on the night of, well, not the 30th, but close to the 30th. On the 30th, the moon is way down here with Venus and Mars above it, but on the 31st, The moon is right in between, or really making a triangle with Venus, the moon, and Mars all together. Excuse me. Mars is about 3 degrees up and a little bit to the right. Venus is about 5 degrees to the right of the moon, and it'll just make a really good picture if you have a decent camera and a good eye and a knowledge of how to use it. And let's go one more day into the future. You see that Venus, Mars, and the moon actually make a nice little line in the sky. So anyway, those are the events. Let's talk real quick about the constellations. I don't want to take up too much time, but if we take a look at the constellations, let's go back to like January 15th. And if you take a look at the sky, you can catch some fall constellations, Pegasus and Andromeda up there. In fact, you can even take a look at the Andromeda Galaxy, but I like to start thinking about the winter constellations at about this time. And you can see we have some up. We've got Orion, the Hunter, which is easy to find. When you're looking for Orion, though, you want to look for the 3 belt stars in the middle, surrounded by a sort of rectangle on the outside, which I tend to think looks like a bow tie. But they didn't have bow ties in the ancient Roman and Greek times, so the Greeks made it the Hunter instead of the bow tie. And, excuse me, you can actually look or locate a bunch of different constellations by using the big circle in the sky. And so you go down here to Rigel, and you see that's a pretty bright star. And then you'll find the brightest star in the sky down here. That's Sirius, which is the biggest or brightest star in Canis Major. And if you go over to the left, you find Canis Minor, which has the brightest star, Procyon. Go up and you find 2 bright stars, Pollux and Castor, the 2 brightest stars in Gemini. Then you go up and to the right and you find Capella, the brightest star in Auriga, and down and you find the brightest star, Aldebaran, the brightest star in Taurus. And what you get here is a nice circle. My mouse is broken, so I'm using my finger here. A nice circle of very bright stars and 6 constellations. Also, you can use the belt to find them. If you take the belt and go to the right, you can find Aldebaran in Taurus, the V constellation. And move a little bit further and you'll find the Pleiades, which are brilliant to see in your telescope. Or go the opposite way and find the brightest star, the brightest star, Sirius, in Canis Major. All right, so, and if I were to give you any tips for looking at the constellations, I'd say get a sky map. Skymaps.com does a good one every single month, similar to what I do here, but on paper, much easier to see. So give them a try. And yeah, really, I just hope you have a very good 2017, and I wish you very clear, dark skies for the entire year.